Hello there. So today I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Goren Gordon, who is a double PhD in quantum physics and in neuroscience. He did his postdoc at the MIT Media Lab working on personal robotics, and today he is the head of the world-renowned Curiosity Lab in Tel Aviv University. One of the reasons why I wanted to speak with Dr. Goren Gordon is because I first listened to him about a year ago, engaging with an audience about social robots and how curious robots can help students pedagogically. So today we're going to be speaking a little bit about that, artificial curiosity. We're going to be speaking about social and educational robots. We're also going to be speaking about how society can absorb the automation shockwave that is going to be unleashed from AI, and how we can think about education 2.0 in this age of artificial general intelligence. We're also going to be speaking a little bit about quantum physics and about some of his personal inspirations and life story, what led him to become who he is. You've gone down the bachelor's, master's, and PhD route not once but twice, once in quantum physics, once in neuroscience. And I'm wondering how you came about to make that decision. What drove you to do this? To what degree did your family and your community play a role in this decision? And was this like a pivot? Was this premeditated, written in the stars type of scenario? Just tell me a bit more about how this happened.
So everything started like everything good in science fiction books. So there are two amazing books that influenced my childhood. One of them is Fantastic Voyage 2 of Isaac Asimov, where they shrinked people and then put them inside the brain. And that started me thinking about how the brain works, and I was interested in the brain. And I also read The Emperor's New Mind by Roger Penrose at the same time around, and it got me started on quantum physics. So I actually started thinking about these two things, and I had like a dual love for the
Yeah.
brain and for quantum physics. And I actually did all my degrees in parallel.
Wow.
So it's not a pivot. It's like at every point in time I had 2 degrees. So I did both of my bachelors at the same time and both of my masters at the same time. And I started my second PhD in my last year of my first PhD. So everything was relatively in parallel. Um, and um, and I just really wanted to understand both of them. There were two big mysteries: quantum physics and the brain, and that's how I did. As regarding to my family and community, I was raised in a family where, as long as you learn, we will take care of everything else. So I took that to the extreme, and I never stopped learning. I lived. So my children were born in the same house that I was born in. So I never left my house, never left my parents, and like I just invested like almost all of my energy in learning all the time. So I stopped. I finished my second PhD like the age of 35 or 37. So I was 20 years a registered student. So that was like somewhat crazy. Yeah.
Wow. And after all of this time, all of this interesting journey that you've been on, you're now the lead of Curiosity Lab, very well renowned. And one thing which I find especially interesting, because of this applies a lot to the work that I used to do. What you try to do is essentially formalize conceptual terms in psychology as mathematical artifacts that can be executable code, that you can endow this into robots and AIs, and also to help you think a bit about curiosity and how it manifests itself in children pedagogically and in terms of how they can, excel. So this is really like a multifaceted a combination of like a think tank, like a combination of a research lab, combination of an engineering lab. It's just very holistic. So my question to you is, first of all, what is it like to work in such an environment? And secondly, what are the ambitions, the goals, the visions of where you would like this laboratory to go in the future?
So you're right. I'm really interested in. So again, because of my physics background, I'm always thinking in equations. I mean, that's how I conceptualize the world, like everything. So for me, whenever I encounter something metaphysical, psychological, cognitive, I automatically try to think of how can I formalize it in equations. And in the last decade or so, I started working with robots. And once you have it in equation, you can put it in code and then put it in robots and see what happens. So indeed, I'm actually interested in people more than in robots, and I'm trying to figure out how can I understand people better. Um, so most of my curious robots projects were actually trying to understand how babies work and how they learn by themselves. So I'm trying to like create a baby robot and then from this actually learn about babies and infants. So that's a part of my goal. And also for the long, so I have to say something about the beautiful life of academia. So the beautiful life of academia is that you can do whatever you want. So I don't have like one project. I have like my last count was 21 projects at the same time. So it's like, and each one is a different discipline. It's not a different thing, it's like a different discipline. So my vision for the Curiosity Lab is like one thing, but I have like 5 other things that I'm thinking about. So it's not just, I'm trying to promote one thing of the Curiosity Lab into the future, but I have like 5 or 10 different threads in parallel. But for the Curiosity Lab, what I'm really interested in is to actually really create. I know everybody's talking about AGI now, but I'm trying to conceptualize how. So the difference between how people think now and how they implement artificial intelligence is they think about, okay, we have the internet, we have infinite amount of computation, let's do whatever we can. I'm thinking of an individual. So I want to create an AI that grows like a baby and sees how far it can go. So the baby doesn't have access to the internet. I mean, a baby does not know of all Google images. So the AI they create now cannot be by definition because it's not the same computation and not the same data as a human being. So it's not the same algorithm, not the same data. So what I'm trying to create AI that is approximately like humans. So I'm really working only on cognitive architecture and algorithms that somehow remotely relate to humans, and I'm trying to like in almost all my algorithm and trying to relate all the components of my algorithm to brain structures. So I'm using like my neuroscience background, so it's not just abstract big transformers, 65 billion parameters, but trying to really relate to how the brain works. And one of my goals is to actually also have the data for this baby robot as infants. So I'm trying to like one of my goals is to raise a robot baby. So to actually have a robot baby in the house and raise it as if it's a child, so I will have the right data for it. So this is one of my future projects. Yeah.
That's really interesting because I would say that in my immediate circle, when I just think about how my friends and my colleagues got into AI, it seems like the impetus to get into it was much less about the utilitarian side of AI, how we could unleash value generation because of these basically these gigantic large language models that swallow up all of this corpus of text and somehow learn semantic relationships, etc. It was much more a philosophical pursuit. It was a quest first and foremost to hold up a mirror at oneself and try to divine how we, as sentient conscious beings, produce the experiences that we feel in the behind our faces, and try to seed that into another machine so that we could establish causal closure and mechanistically explain it, etc. And ultimately, I feel in many circles there's another layer of this, which is people are doing much more than this, which is they're trying to uncover some kind of a general theory of search that transcends things that are very efficient, like evolutionary algorithms, etc. And they think that AI could be a means by which to help us find it. It could be that we may uncover something that a generalizable theory of search that transcends all of our other algorithms. And as you point out, these large language models today they give like the emulatory illusion that they function the way that a mind works, when in reality the mind is parcellated and organized in a completely different way. You basically have, in the context of things like the neocortex, this honeycomb-like structure of cortical columns, and then you have all sorts of connectivity that doesn't necessarily resemble the topology of, LSTMs or CNNs or these kind of classical architectures, let alone transformers. But it seems to me also that the quest to build, how would I put it, simulacra, the quest to build emulators of the human mind by building them through like cognitive architectures, I think this appeals much more to those of us that think that AI is a philosophical pursuit, because therein we are trying to discover ourselves by building real, plausible versions of ourselves. So I think that's really interesting that you have this quest that animates you to build what is essentially a sentient little being that is operating in silicon, so to speak. So that's really interesting. Now, when I was exploring a bit more about the things that you've been working on to help students learn extremely abstract concepts, one thing I came across is this idea of you building quantum computer games. And that, to me, when I read that, I thought, whoa, this is just the name quantum computer game sounds just amazing. Could you just comment a bit more about what it was like developing these, and maybe some insights you gained from how students interacted, not just with the revelation that they were going to learn how to build a quantum computer game, but maybe, what was it like for them, and retroactively, what can you say about this whole experience?
Yeah, so again, I learned quantum physics first from a very early age, and I pursued it like very much. And whenever someone hears quantum physics, everybody like backs away. It's complicated. I can't understand anything. But the basic principles, the interesting principles, not the nitty gritty of how to build stuff, but the actual entanglement and superposition and all the quantum measurement and stuff like that are simple to understand. Even mathematically, they're like zeros and ones. There's no complex integral differential equations that I also did, but it's relatively very simple. And I realized that I can teach that the cool stuff of quantum physics very easily. And I thought of how to do that. And what I came up with is that to take games, relatively known games like quantum, like Minesweeper, and just change. Like the mine is now in both in two places. That's it. That's the only change I make. And now let's see what happens.
I see.
And again, it's weird initially because how can it be in the same place? But as I understood it in quantum physics, there's like a leap of faith. The moment you agree that the thing can be in two places at the same time, and that's the only thing you need to this is the only thing that counters your entire being. But once you agree on that and you accept it, all the other stuff, or everything else, suddenly becomes clearer and very straightforward. So it feels like you just take that leap, and then all of quantum physics, quantum computers, quantum algorithms, everything falls from that. So I started with this quantum Minesweeper, and then I realized it's not that good. And with the Schrödinger cat and dog, I could literally explain really everything, like what is decoherence, how quantum computer works, how teleportation works, everything with this super simple game. And the weird stuff is that I gave lectures, so I didn't do experiments whether children are learning from it. But what I did is that I gave a lot of lectures with this game. But the crazy stuff is I gave the lectures to high school biology students, have no understanding of physics, and to PhD quantum physics students, and all of them learned something new, because and they all understood it because it's such a basic principle, and it's suddenly straightforward that you can suddenly understand stuff. That is just really cool. It's amazing that in the end, all of it, I was once in a conference where, what if you can put everything, quantum physics and quantum computers, what's the difference between quantum computers and regular computers? It's like one minus sign in a gate. Like in a regular gate, like 1101 and then 111 minus 1, and that's it. You suddenly have entanglement and stuff, everything. And it's like, it's just really this minor concepts that needs to be understood. And I loved working on it. It's like it combined like in my love of physics and my love of education and my love of games, which is, all three. And I really enjoyed working on it. And I actually did something else since then. I don't know if you noticed, but I wrote a book called The Quantum Matrix. And what we did there, we invented a quantum superhero. So there's a comics in the book, and we just invented the quantum superhero. His name is Henry Barr, and instead of the Superman S, it has an H bar on it. And again, we in the book we literally explain, from the basic superposition to integral differential equations, but we take you all the way, like from simple superposition, then entanglement, and then measurement, and different type of entanglements, and uncertainty principle, and decoherence, and everything through a comics. And supervillains, there's the twists in the plot, and it's a really super cool comics, but it's also teaching you the very basics of quantum physics, which you can understand without the math. There's also math in the book, but you don't need it to understand it. So I really, I worked like 4 years on that book, and I really enjoyed it. And again, it brings forth my love of teaching and my love of quantum physics. So it was a great joy.
Well, on behalf of humanity, thank you for doing that, because I think that the most magical and wonderful things that we can ever learn about are, unfortunately, these are very difficult to wrap one's head around. They can be very abstract, they can be very ethereal, and we don't naturally have I would say, the intuitions, the necessary precursors and foundations formally to be able to understand and absorb these things well. So for a professor like you that is well versed in all of these things, to make the effort to, make this concrete, make this understandable in the everyday sense, to make this intuitive, is really a blessing. So many of us would not be able to understand so many of these difficult concepts if our professors just kept it rigid math, rigid and abstract. But if they were a bit, if they came into our world and gently nudged us towards the math, one step at a time, this is how so many of us learned. And this is in particular how I learned. A lot of my professors that helped me with everything that I know today that I can use in machine learning and things like that, they took baby steps one at a time to teach things using analogies, using little stories, and this really were great intuition pumps that helped me today. So I'm going to just take a little bit of a detour into a different topic. We're going to come back into quantum physics a bit later, but I just want to talk a bit about curiosity. So when I was at Carnegie Mellon, before I pursued this capstone project on multimodal emotion recognition, I had the option of pursuing an alternative one, which was intrinsic motivation with sparse rewards. And this resonated with me like, I was rung like a gong just vibrating in the wind. By that, the idea that we could imbue AIs with an innate sense of curiosity. And there was some kind of formalization that I was not aware of, so it seemed like magical technology to me. But I was really lured by it because I felt curiosity is one of those things that, as a human, I cannot fake. I cannot convince myself not to be curious. I just am curious, and I felt like by working on something like artificial curiosity, we are converging on aspects of our being that we can't really, I would say, socially construct. They just are, and that to me was what spurred my interest in intrinsic motivation and sparse reward. Now I understand that you have pioneered a new way of thinking about artificial curiosity and something else called novelty management. I was wondering whether you could talk a little bit more about this. I have watched some of your videos about this. I have read some of the papers as well. But for other people that would be interested, how would you explain basically the intuitions behind this artificial curiosity formalization and the novelty management?
So novelty management is actually not artificial. What I discovered is that animals and people do it. So it's actually not artificial. What happened during my studies, my second PhD is that I started working on curiosity and I tried to explain behaviors, human behaviors and animal behaviors using curiosity algorithms. All of these curiosity algorithms, where the goal of the curiosity algorithm is that you learn how to explore, which means you get rewards if you learn something new. So you learn these what I call the exploration motor primitives. So you learn how to explore a new environment. If you're now suddenly getting into a new environment, you don't randomly move, but you actually have this strategy of how to explore a new environment. And I thought that animals do that. What I discovered, unfortunately, in the middle of my PhD, is that there are other drives. Curiosity is not the only drive of curious animals. And what I discovered is that there is this balance between the drive to explore and the fear of too much novelty. So if you go too much, there's also increased anxiety in animals, and then they back away. And what I showed in my work there is that there's something very cool, which is novelty management, which means that the animals actually control the amount of information they get from the environment, the new information. So there's a limit. You go out. If you don't learn anything new, you continue to go out. Once you get too much information, you actually have like a pain-like reflex from novelty. You're like, too much, I'm going back. And then they go back, process it, and then go out again. And they actually maintain, for each time they investigate a new environment, they maintain the same level of novelty. So why they're doing it, we don't know. Do we have some hypotheses? One of them regards working memory, is that you can't, maintain too much new information. You need to first process it and consolidate it before you can continue to learn something else. And that's something, a constraint on biology, because, computers don't have that problem usually. So novelty management is like something that comes from biology and is not necessarily mandated into artificial curiosity. Regarding the intrinsic motivation for sparse reward, this is really cool because the concept of curiosity is you always learn something. You can't move in the world and not learn something because you don't know all of it. So even if you go to a relatively known environment, you still learn something new, even though it's small. So if you turn on curiosity, you always get rewards and you always improve what you know about the world. And the concept of intrinsic reward for sparse, intrinsic motivation for sparse rewards is that when you try to solve an external problem, but you don't get reward from that, if you turn on curiosity, you learn how the world works, and then you use what you learned about the world to solve that actual problem. And that solves the point of that you get the real reward only in the end. So that's something very cool. I'm unsure of, well, it is related to what I did in this exploration motor primitives, in the sense that what I think biological curious things do is that they learn this, they always have this curiosity, and this curiosity teaches them exploration motor primitives, and then they have this atomic unit of behavior, how to explore, and they can use it for other things, not to explore, but they can use it for other goals, but they have already learned some behaviors. So I'll give an example. The example I love most, that you get a remote, and you learn slowly that if you press a button, then something happens. So that's exploration motor primitive. Pressing a button is exploration motor primitive because whenever you press a button, something, you learn something about the world. But then you use the pressing a button behavior to actually achieve something else. You want to open a door, you want to open a TV. You actually use that behavior to something else, but you already have this atomic unit and you can rearrange it for actually achieving a different goal. So I think curiosity teaches you skills and motor primitives that you can later use to actually achieve external rewards or other types of rewards. So that's like how I think of all of these things together.
Interesting. So it's possible, as you mentioned, that curiosity and these basically these primitive action units that puzzle piece together to generate, how would I describe it, long-term, basically longer timescale actuations. It seems like these kinds of things may be artifacts, biological artifacts of, as you point out, memory management. It could be some other things too, But my question then becomes to you, in this day and age now when we have GPT-style large language models that are basically the what I would describe as the primary foundational building block of new kinds of AI technology, do you think that having some kind of a curiosity style prosthesis to these things when paired, for example, with knowledge graphs or things like that, could be used to help large language models in mechanizing science? Would curiosity be an important piece in there? And if so, how would you think about designing the ensemble of these systems interwoven together?
So it's very interesting, combining LLMs and curiosity. My problem with LLMs is that they're too good.
Yeah.
That's my biggest problem with them. Because they make all of the other technologies obsolete. So there are now works on, robotics transformers 2 that came out like a week or two ago that actually uses, and other things, that uses LLMs for robotics as the common sense engine. So you actually don't need the cognitive aspect of robotics anymore because you have LLMs that actually know how to interpret everything they see and what to do. So my problem with LLM is that they're too good. It feels like, I know it's horrible to say, it feels like cognition is solved, which is horrible for all our cognitive researchers out there. But it feels like, again, from the, let's call it practical perspective, it's a problem for researchers. Again, plugging in curiosity into it, the question is, what do you want it to learn? Because it already knows all the knowledge, abstract knowledge there is out there. There's nothing else to learn from the internet using curiosity. The only thing that is missing, but it's also solved nowadays in the last month or the next several months, is embodiment, which means to put AI in a real physical agent, and then solve all the problems that, again, that biology has to solve, like locomotion and grasping and perception and all the other stuff. But already people are doing that, and it's going to be solved again, if it's not already solved, it's going to be solved in the next couple of months. And then I don't see, it's crazy because of this, what they call today zero-shot learning, right? I mean, zero-shot learning obsoletes curiosity, because curiosity means that you need some data in order to learn. So you're trying to get more data in order to learn something new, and you go to explore something new. Zero-shot learning means that if you encounter something new, you already know what to do, because you know how to generalize from all the previous things that you did to this new place. So I don't know. I have a bleak future of all these algorithms today, given the enormity of what the LLMs can do now. It's a sad day. I think it's a sad day for science.
Yeah. It seems like very powerful large language models are trained by companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, are trained on huge corpuses of data. Some of them, like OpenScrape, have basically scraped through, I don't know, like 30% of the entire internet, so to speak. And it seems like they're obviously able to generalize in eerie kind of ways, in my view, slightly beyond their training data, especially if you kind of daisy chain their prompts to have like these almost like Socratic reasoning chains. They can, in my view, come up with extremely interesting ideas which I haven't seen on the internet before. So despite my searching, so my question is, do you think that large language models plus, some kind of like LangChain style or some kind of like overarching prosthesis that enables large language models to recursively do inference calls and reason their way like like little worker drones? Do you think that this would be satisfactory to? Would it be satisfactory to this following thing? Hypothetically, imagine if humanity's entire knowledge graph, like the civilizational intellect, what it has in terms of the nodes and the relationships between the nodes is an accurate rendition of their relationship, but fundamentally the tree is convolved into the wrong shape because it has a wrong like epistemological footing, or there's unknown data that we haven't discovered yet that won't necessarily obviate everything, but will reconvolve and twist the tree in a different shape. Do you think that basically large language models would be the kind of tools, plus a few other things, necessary to be able to rediscover science and redo it from first principles and essentially establish some kind of a global causal closure where no matter where you airdrop yourself into this knowledge graph, you can always reorient yourself and come back to that node. You don't have this problem where you're at this node and the only way to go back this node is by just going through this completely transient avenue because the arrows are not bidirectional because you don't know the relationship of steps backwards. Do you think that large language models will be able to do something like this, which is just to say, would they be able to come up with completely pioneering new frameworks that would put into question the shape of our knowledge graph, like civilizational knowledge graph? Do you think large language models would be able to do this now, like with the technology that exists today, or do you think there's additional things that need to be incorporated for them to do this?
So again, I'm always asked whether large language models are creative, and I think again they are creative in the sense that humans are creative. That's my problem. Is like I mean, no one ever invented something out of nothing. It's always contextualized. It's always based on something before prior. There is a novelty, but it's not like blue ocean, nothing exists, and then suddenly someone invented something. And I think like large language models can do that. They can discover something new. The thing we need to add to it is the will to learn something new. I mean, one option is that a scientist sits with LLMs and ask it questions, invent something new. The prompt is I didn't try it, but I have to try it at some point. Is that read the last 20 papers on this topic and give me an example of 10 new research questions that arise. I'm pretty sure one of these 20 new research questions will be really cool to investigate and will be like an amazing research topic for a PhD. And in that sense, that's it. That's science, right? I mean, asking the right question is 90% of science. And I think LLMs can already do that. I don't think they need anything else. The only thing that they need is they needed the prompt to ask the question. So you can put on top of them like something like curiosity or other forms of giving them the will, the desire, the goal, and the reward for asking new questions, for discovering something new that they don't know. And it's an interesting research venue. Again, I have a huge problem with LLMs simply because they're too good. And I literally don't. I think what they showed, and for me, that's the biggest revolution, is that there are no more boundaries. Before LLMs, there were things that everybody thought AI will not be able to do. And even though AI is not doing everything, I think now everybody will accept that AI can do everything if you give it enough time, data, and resources. Yeah. So I think the problem is that the boundaries are now blurred almost to extinction. And I'm pretty sure I was in a really cool conference of from the industry, and a very a super special person on both tech and industry came to the podium and said, think about your own job and think whether AI can replace you. And then she gave them 10 seconds and said, hey, you're all wrong. They can replace everybody. It's like, I mean that's it. And if it cannot do it now, then obviously in the next 1 or 2 years it will be able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no more, event horizon beyond which you cannot see. No, everything is possible.
Okay. Yeah. No. The funny thing is that your view is actually shared by a lot of my colleagues. In many ways, there's a saying that AI will be the last invention required by humankind, but it feels in some way that LLMs feel like the last invention needed for AI or something like that. It just feels we get this feeling in our gut that this is what it is. Now, I also have a separate question on topic of I was thinking about this. There is this kind of incremental acquiescence among a lot of people in the AI space that having one monolithic singleton entity that can generate this prodigious inference, that can reason and master abstraction very well, is one thing. But intelligence, as we look at it from like our planetary scale, doesn't just reside in the cranium of one single person. It's distributed socially. There seems to be almost like this network-like effect where we cross-pollinate each other's contexts, and it enables us to navigate through the space of ideas in very interesting ways. Do you think that creating these kind of ecologies or like societies of minds of AIs, LLMs, and is something that would be required to reach this proverbial artificial general intelligence? Or do you think that a singular, like GPT-5 type entity will be like the machine, the final machine, you press the button, and a domino effect in terms of value generation forever, and who knows, maybe like bad things for us? But do you think that this is all that is required? And furthermore, what role do you see, this is a difficult question, humans playing in an age where intellectual and cognitive labor can just be completely dominated and outclass AI can outclass us in that space? So what kind of role do you see humans playing, not just in terms of humans will spend time doing leisurely things and doing things out of self-actualization, but do you see humans having any relevant critically important role once we sort of unleash this AGI?
So regarding your first question, I think you can have a single monolithic LLM simply because humans are constrained by biology. And the reason we need this social aggregation is because a single person cannot know all of it. But computational power has no limitation. You can just simply add more. You can think of LLMs as a distributed thing because, right, it's not running on a single GPU. It's running on, I don't know, millions or billions of small computers, and that is equivalent to the many people that are talking together. It's just doing it much faster and much more coordinated. So I think the social effect is simply because of limitation, not because of it has any advantage. So I think a single monolithic LLM that can read all of human intelligence from the internet is enough. There's nothing else you need to know or do. So I don't see a problem. Again, I loved it. There was a really cool article once on chess. So the people that did this alpha chess that solved all of these chess games, and they beat the humans masters, and then they stopped the project because they beat the human masters. And then some of the programmers continued, and they said, we think that human intelligence, the end, if you reach that, that's it. And they said, what? It's just an arbitrary point on intelligence scale. And they continued evolving and learning this chess game, and they reached beyond intelligence, beyond human. I mean, they reached like algorithm that beat the algorithm that beat the humans. So that's like 2 steps beyond humans. It's not just beat humans. And so human intelligence is just an arbitrary point on the intelligence scale. So, and also even society, a billion people sharing intelligence is an arbitrary point on the intelligence scale. You can always go above it. There's no there's no limits to intelligence. If you have such thing as a scale, the more you have, the more you know, the more you learn, the more you can inference and stuff. So I think that a single LLM with not infinite, but huge amount of resources is enough. You don't need several of those. I don't see any benefits of using several of those. Regarding your second question, is a huge question. I think leisure is good and self-actualization is excellent. And if we can all do only that, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
I think what we humans will do is guide the AI towards direction that interests us. We will use it to solve. I mean, we can think of problems that interest us, not necessarily that are interesting, but interest us, and then we will use these tools to try to solve it. So maybe we'll give AI the option to solve problems that it thinks of, and that will be nice. But I think we can just think of the problems. We don't need to solve anything else. But we can think of problems that we want to solve next. There are challenges, physical challenges that are not solved yet. It will take a lot of time because physical reality is much slower than software. So, hunger, poverty, I don't know, even moving, a robot that moves. So Boston Dynamics is one thing, but it's not solved yet. On the one hand, and Mars colonization is the other thing. And these are physical problems that AI can help us with, but this will not be solved in the next year. AGI may be solved in the next year, but getting to Mars will not be solved next year simply because it's in the physical reality, and everything is much slower in physical reality. So there are still challenges ahead. I think AI will be the tool to solve all of them, but there are still challenges.
All right. So I was wondering. So if you have basically this bubble which encapsulates the human species and all of our activities, and you have this AI that gets generated in this bubble, and basically the bubble represents the span of all of our thoughts, all of our pursuits, and basically all of the negentropy that we've tamed, so to speak. This AI bubble, I assume, is going to grow quite big and quite big. It will occupy increasingly more and more of the value space that is generated by AIs, grow and grow and grow, and then eventually, at some point, it will dwarf our little bubble. And then my question then becomes: in this age where AIs that we have birthed generate almost like magical alien godlike technology every single week, whilst we live in what looks like a quaint little microcosm of a subset of that entire space. How do you see like the unlocks, the technological and scientific and thought space unlocks flow downstream from this AI bubble to us, and what role do you see education playing in that? How do you see like the future of education being able to couple humans, if need, in the right kind of way, to this just bulldozing wavefront of AI progress? How will human beings be able to ensnare all the relevant things as AI just continues to populate the space of the number of joysticks and buttons we can press on reality? How would you see all of this playing out?
So the question of education is both really interesting and acute. I talk about next year. Next year, I think, will be horrible to education landscape. Comparable to the COVID pandemic, it will just be a horrible, horrible year for education. Simply because, again, both in the, for kids and for universities, the question arises of why should I learn if I have this AI next to me that knows everything and I can just ask it whatever I want and it will solve it. And why should I even try to learn something? Because it can solve everything that I wanted. So it was also asked when Google came, Google knows everything, so why should I learn? But now it actually solved the problem. It's not just Google gave us access to the information, but it didn't process it and didn't, gave us an answer to a question, or to a new question, so now it's a huge question in education. I think it really now becomes a question of what interests you. I mean, education should now be totally tailored. It should have always been that, but nowadays even more so, is that expose the child to a lot of interests, a lot of domains. See what interests the child, and pursue that simply because it's interesting, and you want to know, and you want to try and think of something, and you want to do it, and not because there is because you need it for a job, because you don't need it for a job. You don't need a job because AI will do it better than you, regardless. Um, so it will be very, very interesting to see what happens. And again, I think we'll start a symbiosis. In symbiosis, in the sense that as we have cars to get from one place to the other, we have AI to get us from one place in the knowledge space to another point in the knowledge space. And the question is, well, what do we want to do? Um, and it's a very, very, very interesting question. I have to understand. I have to. Okay. I have no idea what's going to happen. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's I have a lot of dark predictions on our society,
Yeah.
and especially in education and other stuff. Um, I think it will also really highlight the. You also want to ask me that question, so I will answer it already. The question on religion and politics. I think whenever there was a rise in technology, there was also a rise in extremists and religion and other, because we're trying to get meaning out of, there's AI, but what is our meaning? Like, what are we here for? And I think it's going to come to it will be like a match in a powder in a gunpowder place, because technology will be so huge. The question is what our meaning and what our place in all of it will increase the popularity of religion, extremist politics, nationalism, stuff like that, simply because we don't know what to do with ourselves. We don't know what our place will be in all of this, and it's a huge question to ask.
Yeah. I feel like, to put it simply, I think that we've kind of, almost like a snake that is shedding its old skin. We have shed this in like, as a civilization. We've shed these like old skins of societal norms and conventions that once upon a time were the kind of social scaffolding that enabled us to behave in very large groups in some semblance of harmony. And now, as we're coming out of there, and you have this social media technology and other things like that that are incorporated into there, I feel like there's a society is being ripped apart by tidal forces of polarization, and all of these kind of things. It just seems to me like, when you look back, way back in the day, in the early days of humanity, we tended to dwell in tribes, small tribes. We could keep track of who was doing what in each little tribe. But these tribes scaled up to a number between like 100 and 200, usually 150 people, because that's the level of which you can track reputation. It's very difficult to track the ongoings, the wrongdoings of people beyond that size. And so it seems like one of the ingredients required to build basically states and cities and things like that was religions. It seems like religions are this ingredient that structures the behavior in large groups. It enables people to walk in lockstep, to have a commitment to unity, shared purpose, common destiny, hope, these kind of things, and also being able to play extremely long-term games where people that would start building a cathedral, their kids would carry on building the walls, their grandkids build the walls, the great-grandkids will build the ceiling for the great-great-great-grandkids to walk into. So there's this long-termism that is imbued in a lot of these religious systems. And as since the Enlightenment period, when people have slowly been permeating themselves out of these kind of things, it seems like people are relentlessly exploring additional ways to identify value for themselves and things like that. And in a society like ours, which is basically a gigantic petri dish of ideas, it seems like people are exploring ideas that are orthogonal to each other whilst being adjacent to each other. Social media highlights this
So
difference.
yeah.
And
I think religion is one option. The other one is the nationalism, because also countries are long term and they gaining cohesiveness and stuff like that. I once wrote a mass. I think it was called The Other Choice. And if you trace out a human history, um, human advancement was always when you get to another place, when you start new. So
yeah,
we started from Africa, and then we go to Mesopotamia, and then Europe, and then also the United States. It's like something totally new, and it's a superpower now. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's a superpower, and it's one reason for it is that it was something new. And now we're in this Earth, and there's nothing new. We can't go to a new place and start over again. And we need to, and we need to start something new. And I just reread Asimov's Foundation, which I recommend everybody to read at least twice. And he speaks there of, the problem with the human race is that it's all about power. In the end, it's all about power. It's a power struggle between things, people, nations, religions. I don't know. It's a power struggle, and you need to, and you need to start anew in order to eliminate all the powers, and only then you can start something new. And we're in the place where we cannot do that because we don't have yet another planet. And that's why we're boiling within ourselves. I mean, we're going back now to nationalism and religion, which was dominated a couple of 100 years ago, and we're going back to that because we don't have any other option. We cannot. It's very hard to start something new, like really new, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There's a famous saying, which is that societies are like individuals; they stagnate when they don't grow. As you point out, just if you imagine humanity as some kind of a hyperorganism that is composed of these relatively balkanized, consolidated blocks of communities, whenever there is basically a new niche for this like hive mind to percolate its way in through, it kind of shatters a lot of conventions and a lot of ossified hierarchies and just conventions get reshaped because it's a new situation. How can this hive spontaneously self-assemble into a harmonic whole in this new setting? It forces a lot of these actors in this play in this situation to change a lot of these things. So I actually think long term, one of the things that humanity will need to do in order to survive is to, if it has the power to do so, to continue to grow and to expand. It almost feels like as the saying goes, humans were born on Earth, but humanity was not. That's the cradle of humanity, but humanity was not meant to die in the cradle. We're meant to expand beyond that. So, Dr. Goren Gordon, thank you very much for taking this call with me. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I look forward to following a lot more of your work. I'm really interested in everything that you do in social robotics, in artificial curiosity, and I'm just eager to know what you're going to be up to next, and I hope to keep in touch with you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.